Hello and welcome to another D&D Stories. I am your host, TheWriter, and this is a show where I sit here and regale you with all the tabletop gaming stories and remember when something cool happened. So, today we need to discuss what I believe to be a personal demon of mine, a flaw that started for me in middle school and followed me all the way up through college, just like something I didn't even realize about myself, but over the span of about 10 years, I gained a bad reputation for something that you guys probably don't have any inkling of, but I feel the need to explain myself, and it is D&D related, but it's kind of a meandering story. So we're going to step away from the campaigns for a little while, away from the lore and different other things, because it has to do with Gamers Guild. Now, you've probably heard me mention the name Gamers Guild now and then, that when I went to Western Kentucky University, go Hilltoppers, I was a part of a club called the Gamers Guild, and they were a group, given the semester, a group of between 50 and 80 people that would meet on Saturdays at the Downing University Center, which is sort of like, it's got rooms, and that's where the cafeteria was, and your club could meet here. You could rent out this room or get this space for student council, for Gamers Guild, for graduation parties. It was a big space, but it also happened to have like our sports bar and the main cafeteria and a few other places. It was a gathering area, several story tall building, and the Gamers Guild would meet there pretty much every Saturday while school was in, and they would rent this great room. And off of the great room were three other smaller rooms, and those were usually held for tabletop games, because you don't want to be shouting over 60 other people while you've got one DM and 4 to 6 players. You know, you'd never get anything done, much less any role playing. So the Gamers Guild was a pretty big, pretty well-respected group at the time. I mean, we had great Halloween parties. You can imagine about 45 people running around dressed like pirates or ninjas. We had a theme every year. It was great. But I was a part of the Gamers Guild, and that was like an endless stock of people that played D&D, of people that played Magic the Gathering, people that played like hobby board games like Settlers of Catan or Dungeonscape, or, you know, you wouldn't find like Monopoly there, you wouldn't find Sorry there, or regular playing cards. It was like a hobby gaming guild. You weren't allowed to play video games either. Only on very special occasions did you ever see anybody wheel a TV into that room, because nobody wanted to carry it all the way across campus. So it was a hobby gaming group, a whole bunch of people. And of course we had our own constitution. We had a president, a treasurer, a vice president, etc. We threw our own parties. We gathered up our own money for whatever events we were running. And it was really cool. And in addition, there was the artifact keeper. And the artifact keeper was just a fancy name of saying, you know, this is the person that has the closet space for all the fancy board games and any Magic the Gathering cards that nobody's using and stuff like that. And the artifact keeper would come every week with a big clipboard and say next week you wanted to play Andromeda. And you'd be like, okay, Tony Lanham wants Andromeda next week. And then, you know, at the end of that guild meeting, that person would go home and be like, okay, so-and-so wants this, so-and-so wants this, Tony wants to play Andromeda, and they would put that stuff out of the closet into their car trunk or whatever and show up with those games next week. Now, in addition, if you had a certain level of seniority in the Gamers Guilds, like say you've been a member for a year or 2 years or 3 years, whatever, you could borrow things from the artifact keeper and take them home for a week. Now, one of the artifacts in there was something called the Fabled Gig of Books. Now, what is that? It was a jump drive with every single Dungeons and Dragons book from 3.5 that had ever been printed. So the core books, the splat books, the completes, all of the campaigns, the Stronghold Builder's Guide, you know, all the little books that nobody seems to have anymore because they stopped printing them. We had hard copies of all of those books, but some of those, I think the Stronghold Builder's Guide is like 15, 20 years old. You know, you don't want to just have people walk off with those regardless of how cool you think they are in your club. So the Fabled gig of books were just all those books scanned onto a thumb drive, and it was kept in this little like tackle box thing that had like a velvet inside, like it was some sacred artifact from a fantasy movie. It was great. But it was kept under lock and key because you had to be in Gamers Guild for at least a year before you could take things home, and the Fabled gig of books tended to disappear now and then. So finally, the club president of Gamers Guild said, fine, enough. From now on, nobody can borrow the Fabled gig of books without my explicit permission. And they wrote that into the Constitution, and, you know, all the other officers signed it, and they gave a handout, hey, you know, Artifact Keeper, from now on, nobody gets the Fabled gig of books without, you know, going up saying, you know, so-and-so wants to borrow it, is that okay? And then they'll give you like a receipt, and you say, you know, sign your name here. If you lose it, you know, it's going to suck to be you, and stuff like that. So, once I learned of the Fabled gig of books, I was like, wow, I want to borrow that. I want to have every 3.5 book ever. And you know, because as soon as you get a thumb drive home, you can plug it into your computer, copy everything off of it, and suddenly you have every 3.5 publication ever made. Yes, please. So, getting back to the start of this, where I was talking about personal demons, I found out later from one of my friends that who had known me for like 10 years, and finally one day he blew the lid off something that I didn't know about myself. He said, Tony, you're not the kind of person that people want to lend things to. And I said, why is that? And he goes, well, you remember when you were grounded for like 6 months and your dad didn't want you to have any electronics? And I go, yeah. And I go, I was miserable. And he goes, remember when I lent you my Game Boy and like Pokemon Blue and a charger so you could hide that in your room and play Pokemon when your dad wasn't home and stuff like that? And I go, yeah. And he goes, I never saw that Game Boy again. And I go, really? And he goes, yeah. And he goes, do you remember when we were in high school and I lent you Final Fantasy 12? And I go, yeah, that game sucked. And he goes, you sold that for a Happy Meal. I go, I did not. And he goes, you did so. You made a Facebook post about it too. And I go, really? He said, yeah, you borrowed it for like 6 months, then suddenly you believed it was yours, you hated it, and then you sold it and you bought a Happy Meal. And I go, Jesus. And he goes, you remember that skateboard? And I go, okay, yes, fine. And he goes, no, you're going to hear all these. And he goes, you remember that skateboard in middle school? And I go, what skateboard? And he goes, and he goes, I had a Super Saiyan Goku skateboard when we were in middle school, and you borrowed it from me. Or no, you borrowed it from so-and-so. There were like 3 friends there at the time, just bringing this in like an intervention. And it goes, you borrowed that from so-and-so, and then you brought it back like 3 days later, like snapped in half. And I go, that was an accident, and I paid him back for that. He goes, yeah, but you can't find those anymore. They only made a few that were in that particular style. And I go, yeah, but I was practicing my grinding. It wasn't a grinding board. It was a half-pipe board. And I go, is there a difference? And he goes, yes, there is. A half-pipe board cannot withstand the weight that a grinding board can, because as soon as you put your feet on either end and you jump up on a rail, it snaps like a Twix bar, and then you nail your junk. You remember that? And I go, yeah. And he goes, that was somebody else's skateboard. And you remember that N64 controller? And I go, yeah. He goes, you took that to a birthday party, somebody's birthday party, and then when you brought it back, the the thumbstick was loose. And I go, loose? And he goes, yeah, you guys were playing Mario Party or something? Somebody roughed it up and it was just useless after that. He goes, you are not the person that we want to lend things to, like, ever. And just boom, laid this horrible thing like I had no idea. And like I said, this took place over the course of about 10 years, these 4 or 5 different things. He goes, nobody is going to want to lend you anything. And I go, I'm sorry? and you ever have that happen? Like your friends just suddenly take you aside and tell you something horrible about yourself, like dude, you're acting racist, or this is, you think such and such is funny and that really bothers people, or we can't lend you things because we never get them back, or no, we're not going to lend you money. Here's 5 times when you refuse to pay people back. You ever have that just land on your head? Oh, that was me. That was me from like middle school up through the end of high school. Don't lend things to Tony because you won't get them back, or if you do, it'll be busted. So that is a personal demon of mine that I have just revealed. Now, fast forward up into college, and none of my high school buddies went to the same college as me. Thank God, because they would have told the Gamers Guild guildmaster to not lend me anything ever out of the closet of artifacts. But I saw the Fabled gig of books on the list, the big list on the card on the clipboard, and I go, what is this? What is the Fabled gig of books? And they tell me all about it. And I go, oh, well, it takes, a year and a half of seniority, so three semesters before they trust you with it, because, if you borrow like a $90 board game and you make off with it, well, oh, he was a new member, he just came in here to rob us. No. You need X amount of time having spent in guild, X amount of time signing your name on the attendance sheet. But I'd had X amount of time, X number of semesters in the Gamers Guild that they said that they took it over to the guild master and said, hey, Tony wants to borrow the Fabled gig of books. And he thankfully does not know my reputation for destroying and or selling and or losing things that people have lent to me. I'm so ashamed. I really am. And if my high school buddies could see me now, oh my God. But he sees, he looks, they look through like the laptop that has all of Gamers Guild's files and stuff. Well, Tony's been here for 2 years. He's trustworthy. He plays Magic the Gathering and has run D&D campaigns, and we can lend him something. We'll see him next week anyway. Yeah, give him the Fabled gig of books, and the Guildmaster signs off on it. And so somebody pulls out their car keys and unlocks the little box, and they flip it open. It's plush and velvet inside, because of course it is. And they take out this beat up little jump drive. Now, I went to college during the era where like thumb drives were like a brand new thing. Like if you went into Best Buy, you would see like a 1 gigabyte hard drive for like $36, like back when they were new and expensive. But it was just this old beat up cracked thing. It looked like a freaking artifact even back then. It had changed hands enough times before it ended up in Gamers Guild as an artifact, and enough people had borrowed it. It looked weathered and beaten. It was just an old gray like Geek Squad thumb drive that had been through hell, but it was still there, and it still had every 3.5 publication that there ever was on it, so that was extra cool. And he goes, don't take the box, just take the drive, put it in your pocket, don't lose it, blah, blah, blah. And I go, yeah, awesome, thanks. And I play Magic the Gathering for the rest of the night, and I go home to my little, like, economy apartment, this tiny little, the bedroom is the living room, is the sitting room, and the kitchen is the dining room, and the bathroom is the size of a closet, and it's this tiny little place, but it was private, and it was just me living there, so I was very happy there. It's just this tiny ass little place, economy apartment. And at the time I had a laptop, a very slow laptop that was like it would struggle to play Elder Scrolls Oblivion, and I had it to play Warcraft on, which is weird because you'd think an MMO would take more computer power than Elder Scrolls Oblivion, but what do I know about computers? And I got the Fabled gig of books, and I flipped open the little lid that was on it. I stuck it into my laptop, and it took like 3.5 hours, just an obscene amount of time to download all the files. Like, I don't think any of them were zipped. You know, like if you're transporting a large file from one place to another, you zip it so it's much more compact and easy to move from one machine to another. It was not zipped. It was just these giant-ass files that had dozens and dozens and dozens of pictures, because it's just these books scanned in page for page. Like somebody took the binding off and then put them onto a scanner and scanned every single page for days on end until they were all there. And they all looked great. And, you know, there was no glare or anything. It was full color, all the good stuff it was supposed to be. And I waited for like 3 or 4 godforsaken hours that night to get all these books and all these supplements and all these, you know, it was like there were a few issues of Dragon Magazine and White Dwarf Magazine on there. Just get all this stuff and cram it onto my computer. And I had a laptop at the time because I was in college, and I would take it to class to take notes and stuff, because as fast as some of those teachers talked, I could type to keep up but not write. So I would keep Word open and just like type stuff that they were saying, or I would turn on the camera on the back of the lid and just film them while they were giving a lecture. It was great. But I got it all onto my computer, these giant ass files, and zipped them afterwards so it wouldn't take up my whole freaking external hard drive that I'd gotten with it. And after that, it was like 11:30 at night. I usually go to bed at like 8:30 or 9:30 at the latest. You know, I get up very early every day because I hate sleeping in. I really do. That's just another weird fact about me. I freaking hate sleeping in. I will get up as early as I can to do more during the day because I go to bed really early. So, which makes winter really weird when it's dark at like 4 in the afternoon, but I digress. I get everything on there, and it's 11:30 at night. I'm like, God, I'm going to bed. Blah. And I fall on my bed, and I fall asleep as soon as my head hits the pillow. And, you know, my alarm goes off the next day at 5 a.m., 5:30 a.m., and, you know, when you're a freshman or when you're even later on in your sophomore semesters, all the core classes for like English and British literature and all the stuff like that, all the housing was at the bottom of the campus, and all the English classes were at the very top of the campus, because WKU is one big hill. That's why they're the hilltoppers. So I had to get up extra early, and I thought, oh God, you know, I got to get my laptop. Oh, I left it open last night. I slam my laptop closed, and I shove it in my bag, and I hear a crunch. And I stop for 4 or 5 seconds, and I go, what was that? I'm half awake. You know, I don't eat in my apartment. I keep like ramen and juice in my apartment, and I look down, and I pull my laptop out just a little bit, and hanging out of the jump drive slot, the HDMI slot, is half of the Fabled gig of books. I had smashed it and broke it in twine when I shoved it into my bag. And I was like, oh, God, I can't let anybody in my hometown hear about this, ever. They will eat me alive. So I go to class, and I'm freaking out all day because the Gamers Guild has trusted me with this thing that had all these publications on it, that had all this everything that's been in Gamers Guild for a decade or more, and I smashed it. I destroyed it. Half awake, shoving my damn laptop into my bag so I could rush to class. And I was like, oh, they're going to kill me. They're not going to let me borrow anything ever again. And So I was like, okay, I've got like 5 days to figure something out. Finally, what I did was, since it was like a Geek Squad jump drive, I went to Best Buy and I had, you know, the pieces in my hand, and I was like, okay, walking down the aisles, okay, there's one that looks just like it, and I bought it. And again, this was when jump drives were brand new, so it was like $40 for like, you know, 1 to 4 gigabytes, something like that. Just an obscene amount of money for what today is a very small amount of space. And I take it back to my apartment. I was like, okay, what am I going to do? You know, and I go, oh wait, I've got it all on my computer. So I stick the brand new jump drive into my laptop. I download everything. I copy everything onto this new jump drive. I, you know, conveniently get rid of the old one. And then, you know, I hold it up. It's this brand new thing. It's got all the stuff that was on the old one on it. And I was like, okay, now I got to sneak it back, because they're going to notice if I come in with a different jump drive that's like brand new and not scratched up and stuff. They're going to notice, and they're going to want to know what happened. And I don't want to explain myself. So Saturday rolls around again. Gamers Guild is meeting at the usual great room with 3 side rooms, and of course there's a big pile of stuff that the artifact keeper brought in, along with the tackle box where the Fabled gig of books is supposed to stay, which is of course unlocked because it's empty. So when nobody's looking, you know, I check in, I write my name on the little attendance sheet, and then when nobody's looking, I pull the brand new jump drive out, I slip it into the tackle box, and then I slam it closed and I lock it and I walk away. I was like, nobody has to know about that, ever. So never lend me things, you guys. If we ever meet in real life, don't let me borrow anything ever, because even in college, God, I destroyed, you know, probably a 10-year-old thumb drive full of all the awesome D&D books ever, from 3.5. Destroyed it. Had to buy a new one. God. But hey, I guess, you know, out of all the flaws to have, that's a fairly preventable one. Just don't lend me anything if you ever want to see it again. But that was my adventure with the Fabled gig of books. So I know that wasn't really a campaign story, but that was just kind of like a personal, this is what happened to me, that was related to D&D stuff. So, you know, learn well this lesson. If somebody lends you something, take care of it. And if you destroy it, replace it as soon as possible. You know, don't borrow money. Don't do anything. Don't take other people's things. Because bad things happen to me whenever I borrow anything from anybody. You know, the local library, I don't even go in there anymore. So, I hope you enjoyed that story. That's just my personal flaw. You can't lend me things, because bad shit always happens. I hope you enjoyed that story, and I will see you guys on the next D&D Stories. Keep gaming. Hey guys, thanks for watching. I really love telling D&D stories, and I also really love eating food. So if you'd like to toss a couple of gold pieces into this humble bard's hat, be sure to check out my Patreon. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to hit the like button as well. And if you'd like access to maps, character art, and channel updates too, check out the D&D Stories Facebook. Keep gaming!